All right. Welcome back to another Wright Stew podcast. I am Paul Stewart.
And I am Brian Wright, and we are on Friday Eve, so that's good, which makes both of us feel well.
That's great, Brian. It's actually, so to those who aren't aware, that means Thursday. And it's not just any Thursday, Brian. It is an NFL nerds kind of, clearly not their Super Bowl because they have a Super Bowl, but a big day for NFL teams, NFL franchises, fans of teams. I'm wearing my Jonathan Stewart, my J Stew jersey. For those watching us, old 2A, and this is a really nice one, dude. It's like the stitch and everything. I've had a few jerseys in my time that have clearly my own. I had a Cordell Stewart jersey back in the day because I like.
Do you think you could fit pads underneath that one?
It's a little snug, buddy.
Okay.
I'm sure I could get them in there. Those little pads. Not the old
Hey, tell me this.
Jackson
How we do this podcast? Does the draft really excite you?
I like the excitement of the first like 5 or 6 picks. The NFL, most drafts, maybe outside of the NBA, most drafts are pretty odd because in the NFL, you know the quarterbacks, you know the running backs, receiver, like you know the skill position, but teams are really built in the trenches, right? It's Abdul Carter off the edge. Like I didn't really know him very well until doing more research on the draft. Clearly like Mario Williams at NC State, we knew him because we're NC State guys, right? But I like the first 5 or 6 picks. I like the trading up and trading down, kind of the bartering sort of stuff that's going on. I like it looking back on it like 3 or 4 years later to see like, oh, one of the dumbest things is the immediate over A+ on this draft. Like, oh, really? Because they haven't played a down yet. Like, you can project it as an A+, I guess, but let's let them play a game or two before we start crowning somebody the king.
No, I agree.
Your thoughts? Yeah,
I'm not. I'm curious. I mean, I may or may not watch it, depending on if there's anything else on. I'll say this: I'm not too terribly different than you. I'm curious who goes first or second. I'm curious about the popular guys, Shadeur, Hunter. Maybe the quarterback that was at Texas. I'm not sure. Like you said, you don't really know whether this draft is good until about 3 or 4 years later. Yeah. And I think even in the first round, you're like 50-50, right? So there's a bunch of bad picks, even with a ton of research. And so I don't know. What I don't understand is the people that go and show up and scream
at the draft.
I don't understand that. I mean, this really shows you can really put football kind of wrapped in any kind of form and people go nuts. I don't understand it. I would rather do almost anything else other than go stand and not watch a sporting event. That's like going to award shows. Even if you could, I think it would be neat maybe now if I'm trying to be honest with myself. Like if you could go to the Oscars or Grammys, any award show, anything that don't really have any substance, that's all kind of fluff and kind of BS, I'm not into a ton. But I am curious how these guys turn out. Obviously, I sent you an article earlier today kind of confirming. I don't know if we mentioned it on our podcast or if we were just talking about it off on our own. But Shadeur, he's kind of got that reputation as being one of the most arrogant. One of the.
Yeah, read the. Was it a tweet or an X?
It was basically. I don't know. I don't love anonymous stuff because you don't know whether somebody's putting this out to play draft games. But the quote was essentially saying, and I don't have it directly in front of me, Paulie, but it was essentially saying that, hey, it's one of the most entitled players I've ever interviewed, and really one of the most disappointing or one of the most.
He said one of the worst interviews he's ever been a part of.
Yeah, and I don't think you put that out there. I don't think if you're playing kind of the draft games, like sometimes I know they do. but that wasn't really surprising. I told you, Paulie, there's parts of me that I really love about Dion. I do feel like he is kind of, you know, really put wings on his kids in a lot of situations that allowed them to kind of glide and kind of appear to be successful. Maybe they are. Obviously, Shadeur's a good player,
Yeah.
but I don't know that if his last name. I heard somebody else say this. If his last name is Smith, he's still drafted. I think, but it's probably in the fourth or fifth round, and he's going to have to grind to ever get a real opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm probably in the same boat with you as well. Like, but you know some of that pedigree, right? It's
I don't know if it. I don't know. I think a lot of times people use that word, and I think more about who you are. Obviously, Dion was an exceptional athlete. I
yeah,
think we talk about a lot with like Dominican players. You got to have something that puts a chip on your shoulder, and
yeah.
if everything is easy, I don't know if you're really building that chip on your shoulder. You got to have something that allows you to work when nobody else is looking, allows you to focus when nobody else cares whether you're focused. And I don't know if you have that growing up in a really wealthy environment. Don't be wrong. There's been other quarterbacks. Peyton Manning, clearly his dad was a successful NFL quarterback, and him and Eli both became very successful. I don't think the money was the same then. It appears that their nephew is going to be a really good quarterback in Texas, to be determined, I guess. But I would say unless you're really diligent, I think it's really tough to raise kids with affluence and money to be humble and have drive. That is a real challenge. I think for all of Donald Trump's kind of faults, not to make this political, because I know there's a lot of people who hate him and this and that, but his kids appear to be very normal and
Yeah.
very likable, driven. And again, not that they don't have a lot of stuff handed on the platter, but that's really, and again, people say, well, he didn't raise them. Well, he put them in the right situation
Dude,
to be successful adults.
how is Barron so tall?
I don't know. Maybe it's some type of DNA kind of, manipulation. Maybe it's, what was it called? CRISPR. Maybe it's that CRISPR technology they've been
I don't know
talking
about
about.
that. That dude is tall, but so to your point about kind of drive and chip on your shoulder. So I think two of the best ever, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Like Jordan, like you hear all these very famous stories, but like he found like the littlest thing and turned it into in his mind, like, oh, they said that about my family, or like he would just turn things.
And it may not even have
It
said
may it may have
anything.
been like a guy was like, hey, say hi to your mom for me. Yeah,
Right.
what'd you say? I'm gonna
Right.
destroy
He
you tonight.
legitimately knew his mother. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. So that was like, and then Kobe Bryant. I think Kobe had just a whole different vantage point in his. I mean, he was thinking about legacy from the time he was 15 years old. It felt like he was in a spotlight early on. And those
Well, what's
guys,
so interesting about Kobe, there's never been anybody who's copied somebody and was the 1B off of somebody more than he did. And
yeah,
his dad, I was famously played professionally in Europe. Kobe spoke Italian, grew up kind of differently than a lot of urban kids that are
yeah,
successful basketball players. He really grew up more European than he did American. Then he comes to Philadelphia, has results, and continues kind of to have that chip on his shoulder, though. It never felt and again, we call it chip on the shoulder, but just that drive to just grind. And it's hard to have. I mean, I think even as a successful person, whether you have I think that's always the risk of giving somebody any big contract. Like you think you arrived. And I think that may have been, I got hurt, but I definitely remember like feeling like I'd accomplished something when I got drafted. And I think the mindset has to be, if you're going to be great, it has to be, you don't really accomplish anything until you've established yourself in the big. You can't look at like where you're at until 10 years later and kind of be like, all right, I did a good job and I did the best I could do. Otherwise, complacency and some of those things set in, I think.
yeah. And it's interesting because I remember. So I was drafted by the Brewers, right? 90. I was there 96 to 02. And the first year there in rookie ball is just kind of figuring out life, right? Like pro ball life sort of thing. And then started kind of getting to work and established myself as somebody who was going to work hard, put the time in, be in the weight room, do all the right things. And I remember the first year I had a chance to be I wanted to stay with the Brewers. They didn't want me, so I went to the Red Sox. And I remember thinking, crap, I've got to start over. Like they don't know me. Like they know my numbers. They obviously wanted me over here for a reason, but they don't know what my work ethic is. They don't know what my drive is and all that sort of thing. So I remember like my wife and I, we got down to spring training a couple weeks early because I wanted to get into the weight room at the facility, and not as a look at me sort of thing, but as like I I want to show them that I'm serious about this. Like I want them to know that they made the right investment. They made the right selection in free agency with me. Like ultimately it didn't work out like on the field, but I never wanted anybody to question my work ethic or anything like that. So that was
Yeah, and I don't know. It'll be interesting, Mr. Jor. I don't think you never, even if it is a ploy on the draft and somebody trying to kind of play games and trying to force him down lower to where they think they can get him, and that could be the
yeah.
only reason. The other possible reason is actually true, which I could imagine it coming across that way. A lot of times you get in those rooms, and I've heard guys talk about, it's not just, hey, how you doing? Tell me about your family. It's, hey, they draw plays up on the board. Hey, if they're in this coverage, what's your alternatives? Where's your outplay? Where can you
Yeah.
get this done? And it's not just a conversation personality type standpoint. It's truly like, do you really know what the hell you're doing, or have you just been told and been set up to be successful? And there's been a lot of great quarterbacks, college quarterbacks, that didn't transition. And it's because their college offense didn't really give them a chance to develop. Um, and again, does he have all the physical tools? Yeah. I mean, he's not a great runner, though. He's kind of more, he's a lot closer to a Peyton or an Eli or a Tom Brady who supposedly trains him than he is to some of the more modern day, two-way quarterbacks that can really run. And so he's going to have to really be able to be a cerebral guy. And I think he's probably capable of that. But I think sometimes you can be limited by what you think you know. And I agreed. The other thing that it mentioned in that was he has a tendency to blame his teammates, which I saw, and some of the post game interview stuff where it was truly just reactionary, raw, very normal kind of, I would imagine, reaction to some of the frustrations that he dealt with. But something you can't do if you're a leader of a team. You take the responsibility and say, it's my fault. I have to do better. And I think that's what you want to see from an organization. So if it's true and it's not a ploy, I think I could see him going down to the second, third round. There's going to be people that are scared of what he thinks he can be, and maybe he can be good, but I don't know if you risk a first round pick.
Yeah. But I mean again, if there's a team late in the first round who needs a quarterback, I mean, I think that's the perfect situation for him. Sit behind an established guy. I don't know how well he does in that quarterback room if he's not playing. But
He's always played since he's been a freshman in high school because
yeah,
his dad's kind of worked the system around and been
right.
the coach. And yeah, I think that's going to be different, dude, because dad's not a coach. And again, we talk about it. That's the reason I don't want to be the coach of Banks here in the next year or two, just because I think it is to be coached by somebody else. And again, not that there will be any harder on him than I will, but you got to be able to, make sure you know how to impress other people, because it's different when it's your father coaching. It's different when, you got to be able to take some tongue lashing from somebody else and, hey, I can pick you up a little bit maybe, or you got to be able to pick up yourself. And so I do think there's something to, literally he's been coached from the time he's sixth, seventh, eighth grade through college by his father, which is going to be an adjustment.
Yeah, I'm looking late in the draft. So I'm going starting at 32 and I'm working backwards to 31, 30. So 32 is the Eagles. I mean, I think Hurts is pretty set there. 31 is Mahomes and the Chiefs.
I don't think
30,
anybody in that.
30 is
Yeah.
Josh Allen. 29 is the Commanders, who we think they found their quarterback of the future. I mean, he was pretty darn good this year. 28. So 28 is the Lions. The Lions may be a good fit. Golf. I don't think the Lions are. Clearly, they like him a lot.
Well, they just paid him too, so I don't know how that works, but
I
not that they can't make that work.
yeah,
Sometimes the contracts aren't guaranteed, but they did just give him a shit ton of money.
yeah. 27 is the Ravens. I think Lamar's pretty solid there. 26 is the Rams.
Which you don't
Stafford.
know. I mean, obviously
Stafford's been around a while, man. That could be.
Stafford's not going to play forever. There have been rumors that I think that they were looking at maybe doing something different at one time.
Yeah, yeah. And then you got the Texans, who I think Stroud is probably there. The Vikings, who
Don't really know.
McCarthy's going to be the guy for at least the next season to some extent. Green Bay's got Jordan Love. 22 is the Chargers. Just a lot of young quarterbacks in this, or very well established quarterbacks. 21, the Steelers. That might be a viable option.
I don't disagree there. I don't disagree. It feels like Aaron Rodgers is going to retire, should retire. I think if you have to go back and forth this much, it's time to retire. But it may make sense for Aaron to come back in one more year. You draft somebody like Shadeur. But I don't really know, to be frank and honest with you, I don't know how he really grades out. Like you take away, like I haven't looked at all 22 and broke down. I mean, that's not what I do.
Yeah.
And I'd be curious how he truly grades out, as far as a quarterback.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Ryan, to stay on the same subject, but switch gears a little bit. You asked me earlier, so I'm wearing my J Stu jersey, like I said. You asked me earlier the best Panther draft pick of all time. So I'm gonna give you my kind of Mount Rushmore
Okay.
of Panther draft picks and Panther players, and you tell me. So I've got five. So
Okay.
I've got to kick one off,
Okay.
and I'm gonna go chronologically. So my first, Steve Smith,
100% on there.
third,
100%.
third round pick in 2001.
From Utah, from a community college to Utah, which is pretty.
Love Steve Smith. Love that dude so much. Just dude, talk about playing with a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah. I thought he
Dude,
may have got caught up, maybe having an affair here recently. But as far as on the field, awesome.
I mean, dude could cook. I mean, just could.
And he probably got options too. So it's not really fair to me to judge. I'm not really judging, but great player on the field for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Good. I mean, does some commentating, does a good job there, but and just understand. And he was in that era with like To and Ocho Cinco and
A legitimate
uh,
5'9" guy that he would run away from guys, he'd run through guys. I mean,
well,
just the toughness.
blocking dude, just the ultimate teammates. Like just
Talking about chip on your shoulder, he felt like he had two chips on his shoulder. He was just,
dude,
yeah,
his whole shoulder was a
just
chip.
fire.
Yeah. So all right, so that's my first. The next year, the Panthers take Julius Peppers.
Probably should be on there. I'll be curious who else you have.
All right. 2011, number one overall pick, Cam Newton.
Okay.
The next year, the Panthers take out of Boston College, Luke Kuechly.
Yep. I agree with him for sure.
And then the last one, 2017, eighth overall pick, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think I got to kick Christian off, not because he didn't have some good years to establish himself, but we didn't do a whole lot of winning with him there. All those other guys, there were at least a season or two where there's some really, really successful seasons as a whole.
Yeah.
Famously, Newton took him to the Super Bowl. Luke Kuechly was phenomenal, and he was a part of those teams.
Defensive player of the year. Yeah.
Julius Peppers obviously had good years, and then Steve Smith is Steve Smith. And so, unfortunately, as much as I love Christian McCaffrey, white running back, you don't get many of those. Yeah, I got to kick him off.
McCaffrey's off. There's
Do you do the same? Who are you kicking off of that?
I think my mindset is probably the same as yours. Steve Smith felt like he set the tone for who the Panthers were for like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Peppers, while like I've shared my Pepper story, just kind of quiet guy, but again, just anchored a defense for again probably 10 years. It was just getting after the quarterback and making everybody else look better by being just an incredible athlete. Luke Kuechly, again, defensive player of the year. was the true like quarterback of the defense. Did everything the right way and was amazingly athletic. And then Cam Newton, man, like almost led the team to an undefeated season at the quarterback position. Uh, Run the ball, pass the ball. I mean, as a Panther fan, I love the Superman stuff. As an opponent,
Nah,
I'm sure
I
he
didn't.
probably. I
I
mean,
didn't. I mean, I felt like
initially I didn't. Then I'm like, that's what he does. It, he was still doing still doing his thing. It didn't
he
distract
was a
me.
good player. What I didn't like is when he would do it when we were down.
Yeah, I
One
didn't.
time he celebrated and got smoked before he went to the end zone. Definitely took a year off his career.
Yeah, you're.
Um, I felt
But
like
then,
it definitely belongs on the list, no doubt. How he played at times was very frustrating.
yeah, McCaffrey. I think like when he set the record for all-purpose yards in a season.
Yeah,
But it felt like he was never, I mean, never really healthy after that. And you're right, they didn't win a whole lot when he was there. So
yeah, yeah. And he's done some good things for the 49ers, but obviously was dinged up this past year. And I think he was healthy like maybe 3 of his first 4 or 5 years. If he's been, maybe it's just 2 of his first 3. And then he was dinged. And then he goes to San Francisco, has a really good year. Then it's dinged for a lot of last year, too. So, yeah, it's interesting, though. Whenever you think about Carolina, it's such a kind of a very short history. Um, we've
well, not
had,
even, it's been 27 years now.
yeah, yeah,
It's been a little while. So some people have grown up and only knowing the Panthers as a team. Yeah, so
for sure.
it's interesting because I still think of like the Marlins and Rockies and Rays and I still think of them as like new franchise Diamondbacks. They've been around a little while, man. There's like all of our kids have been born and they've only known those to be teams, right? So
And the Rockies, speaking of bad franchises, the Rockies right now on the struggle bus. Have
yeah.
you paid attention to them at all?
Well, the Brewers played them in a 3-game set in Colorado, so we watched those games
Did you
and
learn anything? Why are they so bad?
not a whole lot of pitching. Lineups I mean, nobody's going there as a free agent. I
Just
mean,
like hitters would, Chris Bryant went there and has done absolutely nothing. Admittedly, he seems very likable. He realizes he's not performing up to the
yeah.
pay of the contract. And I heard they have spent money. Like if you look at their payroll, it's right in the middle of the pack. It's been a misallocation, not a lack of allocation of funds.
Well, they've
And
had some good players though. Like recently, Troy Tulowitzki and Trevor Story was there. I mean, Trevor Story was a legit like
I
all
don't
star.
think I realized how good a player he was until I watched the Clubhouse. I'm gonna see how many days in a row I can mention that series on Netflix. I think we're on like 8 or 9 now.
Oh yeah.
But when they lost him with Boston, you would have thought they were losing.
Oh, the way
You
they
know,
talked about it on the show was like they just lost, A-Rod basically.
that's right. I was thinking Jeter, A-Rod. Yeah, like they had just lost their guy. And I guess I didn't realize how good a player he is. A really good player, really good player.
Again, I knew because I had him in fantasy baseball for a couple of years, and
Ah,
and so I was on the Trevor Story bus pretty early. Bought a lot of stock in old Trevor, and the other thing the ball still carries at Colorado, but the home road splits aren't as egregious as they once were, right?
well, famously, and you know it probably better than I do as a pitcher, but the humidor makes a difference. But they say they still can't. If free agent pitchers, you do one or two things. Free agent pitchers don't want to go there, and if they do go there, you have to overpay for them. And so I would say you've kind of got to do a. The one thing I did hear, the one knock I heard when you compare their scouting department, when you compare it to a lot of the other successful franchises, especially ones that have done it a different way. And I would say Baltimore, even though they have paid some guys, Tampa, I would say even Pittsburgh has a lot of talent right now. You got to draft well, and they have not drafted that well. And if you're a franchise that is not traditionally desirable to go to, if you draft well, you can sometimes put together a window. And, you know, Pittsburgh Pirates is frustrating, and I know there's a lot of people that don't like their owner as well, or that owner. But man, they've got guys you can name and guys that can play, and they may end up, a touch or two games under 500, but they're going to be very competitive all year.
Yeah. But I mean, the Rockies, and you're right. I think a lot of it has to do with hitting in the draft. And again, I remember with my era with the Brewers, right? A few years after me, they drafted like J.J. Hardy and Corey Hart,
Oh, the Brewers have drafted really well.
and the Brewers
Yeah.
usually like all the Brewers guys are Brewers guys. Like they don't get free agents over there very often.
No,
Nobody wants to go to Milwaukee, but you
I
look
hear
at
it's a pretty cool city. Have you spent some time there?
no, I've driven. I went to a ball game there once, and when I was in the Midwest League, flew through there a couple times, but never really hung out in the city.
I
But
mean, obviously it's cold as hell in the wintertime, and I'm sure it's cold in April, and
yeah.
probably,
Well, they got the dome retractable
okay.
for the ball
Yeah, I
team.
did. I forgot it was retractable. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean they're kind of like this, like what a franchise should be, right? They're Bryce Terang and Sal Frelick, and they got Yelich in a trade. He came over. Um, see, he's probably their biggest superstar, right? Just called up the third baseman Caleb. What's his last name? Just got his first big league home run last night. But it's their guys,
Yeah.
and they do a good job, and they keep him for a few years, and then Ryan Braun was a Brewers guy, Prince Fielder, like all these guys. But
Yeah,
look,
I think you got to draft well in these smaller markets or these markets that may not be as desirable. And I would think from a Rocky standpoint, that may be all I would focus on. It's like because I probably can get like position players to come there and play
oh
because there
yeah,
hasn't been that long ago that they had guys. I mean, you think about Larry Walker, you think about dude, there's been
Helton.
guys, Troy. I mean, there's been a number of guys that have been able to been hitters there, but I don't know. I can't remember a successful pitcher there, and there probably has been one or two.
Well, they had so at one point they had Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado on the left side of their infield.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
that's pretty strong. And how about this? How about we go after like I wonder how knuckleball. I mean, you got to do something different, man. You got to do something
just a
different.
rotation of knuckleballers.
Yeah, dude. I don't know how stuff hits my algorithm. I have somehow like my algorithm is like this guy trying to convince everybody to throw knuckleballs. And like there's some kid somewhere that can throw like an 86-mile-an-hour knuckleball. And I'm like, well, dude, somebody, I mean, that's really, if that's legit, that's be really tough to hit. But I would say just you got to think outside the box because what you're doing is not working. And I think if you have put a decent product, I think the fans show up. Nobody wants to go watch losers though. That's 100%.
Yeah, yeah, that's 100% fair. Well, that the Rockies went for that. Well, they had Ubaldo Jimenez a few years ago, who's really good. Maybe I mean you got to go after sinker ball pitch like Derek Lowe. Back in the day would have been a great.
That's interesting. So you think it's strategy of what they throw? You think would yeah? I don't
I think
disagree
so,
with you.
right?
I guess that's kind of what I was saying with knuckleball, but from a more traditional sinker ball, somebody who does something
Keeps the ball
maybe a
down,
little
gets a
bit
lot of
different.
ground balls. Yeah, maybe that. I mean, you remember the year they tried to get Mike Hampton, or they got Mike Hampton. They backed up the truck and gave him at the
I
time.
don't.
It was something like 120 million dollars. This was back in like 02, 01,
It
02.
doesn't seem like he did great though.
He
There,
did terrible. Like he
yeah.
was awful there. And then I think he ended up with the Mets and that sort of thing. But so they've tried, and a lot of stuff online. It's like, oh, the ownership is garbage, and
I
don't.
don't think so. Like what I'd heard on some interviews was, like I said, the ownership has spent money, but they're not spending money on their scouting department, and that's probably, I think, even though you don't think about it in baseball because it takes time for guys to get to the big leagues, that's really your lifeblood, though. I mean, that's your lifeblood to have a chance.
That's what, yeah. Like I think good organizations, like six of your starters should be like organizational guys, and then you're bringing in other guys from other teams, to kind of fill in roles or fill in needs, and then same thing with your rotation. Hopefully, you've got like three guys in your starting five that are born and bred through the organization. Then you got a couple free agents, and bullpen could be a little mix.
And just to hit on what you said, I mean, a lot of times your trade capital are those young, good players.
Yeah,
So again, you got to draft well to unless you're going to back up the Brinks truck and kind of pay guys or overpay guys. You got to have some players in the lower levels that somebody has some interest in, so you can trade a couple of them for an established
yeah,
guy.
for a big, big guy.
Yeah,
So yeah. All right. Well, hey, we appreciate y'all listening today. Make sure you're checking out our merch shop. T-shirts are flying. It's warming up here in North Carolina. T-shirts are flying off the shelf. So make sure you get your merch in. Brian and I are thinking about some new designs as well. We got to get some new designs. If you've got an idea for a T-shirt, hoodie, something design that you want to see,
Falconeer.
email us at wrightstewartpodcast@gmail. wrightstewartpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to see that. Maybe that'll turn into something real. But otherwise, good luck to your team tonight, wherever they may be drafting. We hope they get the franchise player that they you've so dearly needed for.
I don't. I'm only pulling for the Panthers.
Okay, well, yeah, that's fair.
Out. Go Pack. Go Tigers.